Dona Olga was a lady in her 70s, a widow and with good financial stability, as she lived on her late husband's pension. Dona Olga had only one child, born from her womb at the age of 16, and this baby died a few days after it was born. Her husband was in tears, crying. But Dona Olga, even at a very young age, was a woman with a strong hand and who immediately moved on with anything, even the death of her first child. So, shortly afterwards, a friend proposed adopting a girl. Dona Olga and her husband liked the idea and accepted the challenge. The young lady was already 8 years old. She was very well raised and treated, but displays of affection from her adoptive mother were rare. Over the course of 2 years, people saw that Dona Olga and her husband took good care of the little girl. Then came the proposal for her to take care of a 5-year-old boy. The couple gladly accepted and started taking care of the children. The years went by, the two grew up and, before leaving home and building their families, Dona Olga and her husband continued to adopt children. Some were her nephews, some had been abandoned and she didn't put the gender, color or sexuality of the people she raised above anything else. Everyone was well cared for, as Dona Olga and her husband were people who were born at the beginning of the last century, in the early 1900s. So, you can imagine how their upbringing was strict, serious, without much affection, without many mistakes. They followed their religiosity very seriously and rigidly. The only problem was the mother's lack of emotional affection for her children. Dona Olga was playful, religious, but didn't show much feelings. When her children had to leave, she accepted and moved on. Until one day everything changed. Her husband had cheated on her and had a child out of wedlock. They broke up, but remained married. Her husband went to live with his mistress and her son, who was not his, but he didn't know it. And once again, Miss Olga was not shaken and moved on, because she knew she was doing her part for the world, but she herself felt that something was missing. Even without admitting it, she felt it. Her children were grateful and loved and showed it, but she was strict and serious about it. And at a certain point in her life, already a widow, a friend asked her why she didn't raise another child. Olga laughed and said that she was too old for that, but as she liked her friend very much and she always said that Dona Olga took exemplary care of all her children, she ended up accepting it. It would be the first newborn she would raise. The children, even though they were older and married, did not agree. However, she accepted, since she lived alone in a big house with her dogs and her orchard on a small farm. The agreement was very simple: the child was born and in 2 days would go to Dona Olga's hands. And that's what happened. This child was the grandson of her friend, who insisted that she take care of the child. The mother was no longer able to have children, as she already had many. And so it was done. The child was born and on the day of his birth, Olga's heart beat 3 times more strongly. She had never felt this before and even got scared. With 2 days, the child came to her power without having barely breastfed. Dona Olga took care of him in a different way, as he was very reminiscent of her first child, who had died when she was a teenager and newly married several years ago. The child grew up. Dona Olga did not show affection and never said "I love you" to her children or this one. Perhaps because he was afraid of the pain of losing a child like his first. Dona Olga didn't go to school meetings or mothers, fathers or children's day parties. The boy Eduardo ended up getting used to it. Eduardo, even though he was a full of energy and naughty child, was very smart, got good grades, stood out in everything he did. On the day he learned to read, he was happy to tell his mother. She gave him a happy look and complimented him, but nothing more. Eduardo never forgot this day. Dona Olga's children noticed that she cared for him in a different way, as if she wanted to show her motherly emotions that she never had for others. There was a certain amount of jealousy towards them due to this treatment, even if she avoided showing it in front of Eduardo, but her children noticed how Eduardo didn't have his mother's attention. He, like many children, did an undone, getting ready to get his mother's attention. But it was pointless to do that with a woman as experienced as a mother. He was the only one who had the nerve to kiss her on the cheek and hug her. She didn't like it and scolded him for his sadness. Over the years, in Eduardo's early teens, he began to notice that his mother's mental health was different. Dona Olga started to forget things, she started to have hallucinations and sometimes she didn't say anything. Eduardo tried to warn his family, his brothers, about what was happening, but in front of everyone, Dona Olga was perfectly healthy. Her attitudes and personality only changed when she was alone with her son at home. It was very difficult for Eduardo to accept that his mother was not well. Mentally, and no one saw it, only he who lived with her. Some of Dona Olga's children had also died. Only a few were alive either, and it was only left for Eduardo, in his early teens, to take care of her and be by her side. The family didn't give him credit because he had been a child who wanted his mother's attention and got into a lot of mischief. And it was at this moment that he accepted, deep down in his being, that he should be by her side. He couldn't study because his mother woke up during the nights talking to herself. When her brothers went to her house, they didn't see anything strange about Dona Olga. Only Eduardo knew everything. His studies suffered. The dream of doing medicine is gone. Dating? He could not. He still had help from the maid, who, even though she was paid, did more than she could and should. This is because he likes his mother too. When he was an adult and everyone had already noticed that Dona Olga was not in good health, Eduardo continued to take care of his mother. He managed to complete his studies but failed to graduate. Her mother's money was always all for her health and household bills. One day, Eduardo came home and his mother was already very old, and even so, she got up, hugged him. To Eduardo's fright, he kissed him on the chest and said, "I love you, my son." He was the only child she gave in and said she loved after a hug. For Eduardo, this was the reward of a lifetime. Some time later, Dona Olga died at the age of 99. Life went on for Eduardo, going to work on the second day after burying his mother, because like her, he learned to move on, even in the worst moments of life. It was the greatest lesson his mother taught him. Moving forward, even in pain. This is a story that few know. Stories like this happen every day. Hope you enjoyed this true story. Leave your like, comment what you think. Until later.